The biggest mistake some people make is believing that kindness has no value until the day it costs them everything. Karen Whitmore had spent 12 years climbing the corporate ladder at Brooks Market, one of the most successful retail chains in America. She was known for her expensive suits, her sharp smile, and her belief that rules mattered more than people. On a gray Thursday afternoon in downtown Chicago, that reputation shattered in front of hundreds of employees. The lobby of Brooks Holdings headquarters was unusually crowded. Managers whispered to each other. Receptionists stopped answering calls. Employees stood frozen near the glass elevators, watching a scene none of them thought they would ever witness. Karen Whitmore walked through the lobby carrying a cardboard box filled with personal belongings. Her hands trembled. Her face had lost all its confidence. The woman who once barked orders at everyone around her now looked completely defeated. A security officer politely accompanied her toward the front entrance, while dozens of employees stared in stunned silence. Some exchanged nervous glances. Others pulled out their phones. Nobody understood what had happened. Just 48 hours earlier, Karen had been one of the most powerful regional managers in the company. Now she was leaving the building without a job. As the automatic doors opened, Karen suddenly stopped walking. She turned around and looked toward the executive elevators at the far end of the lobby. Her voice cracked with disbelief. "This is insane. You're destroying my career over one old man." The words echoed across the marble floor. Nobody answered. The silence felt heavier than any response. Near the elevators stood several executives from the board of directors. None of them looked sympathetic. None of them seemed interested in helping her. Karen shook her head. "You can't be serious," she said again. Nobody would throw away 12 years because of some homeless old guy. A few employees lowered their eyes. Others stared harder, trying to understand what she meant. An old man? What old man? Why did everyone in leadership suddenly look so uncomfortable whenever she mentioned him? Karen pointed toward the executive floor. "He walked into my store looking like he hadn't bought new clothes in 20 years. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody." Her voice grew louder with every word. "And now you're all acting like he's some kind of king." One of the executives finally spoke. "Karen, it's time to leave." Her face turned red. All because one employee decided to help him, she demanded. One employee. Across the lobby, several workers exchanged confused looks. They had heard rumors about a cashier. Some said he had been fired. Others said he had disappeared. Nobody knew the full story. Karen laughed bitterly. "You know what the funniest part is?" she said. "That kid lost his job because he helped that old man. He lost everything." The executive's expression hardened. "And yet somehow," he replied quietly, "he's the one whose life changed forever." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. The security officer gently motioned toward the exit. This time she didn't resist. As the doors closed behind her and the cold Chicago wind swept across the plaza outside, every employee inside the building felt the same question burning in their minds. Who was the old man? And what happened inside that store 3 days earlier that could bring down someone as powerful as Karen Whitmore? 3 days earlier, Marcus Johnson had no idea that a single act of kindness was about to change the course of his entire life. 3 days earlier, Marcus Johnson arrived at Brooks Market at 6:45 in the morning, 15 minutes before his shift started, just like he did every day. The downtown Chicago location had not opened yet, but the parking lot was already filling with employees carrying coffee cups and rushing through the cold spring air. Marcus stepped through the employee entrance wearing a neatly pressed uniform and carrying a small lunch bag. At 29 years old, he was known throughout the store as someone who never complained. If a customer needed help loading groceries, Marcus helped. If an elderly shopper struggled to reach an item on a high shelf, Marcus helped. If another employee called out sick and a shift needed coverage, Marcus usually volunteered. The problem was that not everyone appreciated that kind of person. Karen Whitmore certainly did not. Marcus had worked at Brooks Market for almost 3 years. During that time, customers regularly praised him. Some even asked for him by name. Yet somehow Karen always seemed irritated whenever his name came up. She preferred employees who followed instructions without asking questions. Marcus had a habit of caring about people first. To Karen, that made him unpredictable. As Marcus entered the break room, he noticed Tyler Reed leaning against a vending machine. Tyler smirked when he saw him. "Look who is early again," Tyler said. "Trying to win Employee of the Year." Marcus smiled politely. "Just trying to keep my job." Tyler laughed. Trust me. Around here, hard work is not what gets noticed. Marcus knew exactly what he meant. Tyler had spent years learning how to stay on Karen's good side. He agreed with everything she said. He laughed at her jokes. He repeated her opinions. In return, he received easier schedules and better treatment. Marcus never played those games. A few minutes later, Karen entered the break room carrying a tablet. The conversations immediately stopped. She glanced around the room and began assigning duties for the day. When she reached Marcus, her expression barely changed. "Johnson," she said, "you are handling stockroom inventory this morning." Marcus blinked. "Inventory?" Karen nodded. "Is there a problem?" He hesitated. Inventory work meant spending hours in the back away from customers. It was one of the least desirable assignments in the store. "No problem," Marcus replied. Karen smiled thinly. "Good." Several employees exchanged knowing looks. Marcus had received inventory duty 3 times that week alone. Karen continued handing out assignments until everyone left the room. As Marcus headed toward the stockroom, an older cashier named Linda caught up with him. "You know she keeps doing that on purpose, right?" she asked quietly. Marcus shrugged. "Maybe she just needs inventory done." Linda gave him a look. "You are the best customer service employee in this building. Everybody knows it." Marcus smiled. "Then I guess the boxes are lucky today." Linda laughed despite herself. That was the thing about Marcus. He refused to become bitter, even when life gave him reasons to. Around noon, the store became busy. Through the stockroom doors, Marcus could hear shopping carts rolling across the floor and customers filling the aisles. He spent hours organizing shipments and scanning inventory records while wondering how much longer Karen planned to keep him hidden in the back. Then, just after 1 o'clock, dark clouds rolled over the city. Rain began falling against the building's large front windows. The steady rhythm echoed through the store. Marcus was carrying a box toward the sales floor when he noticed something unusual near the entrance. A figure stood alone outside in the rain. An elderly man leaned heavily on a worn cane while staring through the glass doors. His clothes were soaked. His shoulders sagged from exhaustion. And inside the store, several employees were already watching him with expressions that made Marcus uncomfortable. The old man remained outside for nearly a minute while rainwater streamed from his gray coat and collected around his worn shoes. Through the glass entrance, customers glanced at him before quickly looking away. Some frowned. Others shook their heads. Near the front registers, 2 younger employees exchanged amused looks. "He probably came in to get warm," one of them said quietly. "Or used the restroom," the other replied. Neither of them sounded concerned. Marcus slowed his pace and watched from several yards away. Something about the scene bothered him. The man looked exhausted. Not dangerous. Not disruptive. Just tired. Yet nobody seemed interested in helping him. As the elderly man finally reached for the door handle, one of the store's security guards stepped forward. The guard opened the door slightly, but did not move aside. Marcus could not hear every word through the glass, but he saw the old man speaking politely. The guard responded with a brief shake of his head. The conversation lasted only a few seconds. Then the elderly man lowered his eyes and stepped back. Marcus frowned. That was unusual. Brooks Market welcomed thousands of customers every week. People from every background shopped there. Why was this man being stopped at the door? The rain continued falling harder. Cars passed through the parking lot, splashing water across the pavement. The old man adjusted his grip on the cane and remained standing alone near the entrance. A customer exiting the store glanced at him and immediately walked away. Another customer pulled her child closer as she passed him. Marcus felt a knot forming in his stomach. He knew that look. He had seen it directed at people his entire life. The look that silently said someone did not belong. The look that judged before asking a single question. Near the front office, Karen stepped onto the sales floor carrying her tablet. She noticed the elderly man almost immediately. Tyler walked over beside her. Marcus watched them exchange a few words. Karen looked toward the entrance and rolled her eyes. Even from across the store, Marcus could recognize that expression. It was the same expression she used whenever she thought someone was beneath her attention. Tyler laughed at something she said. A few seconds later, the security guard folded his arms and remained stationed near the door. The message was obvious. The old man was not welcome. Marcus looked around. Nobody else seemed interested in doing anything. Customers continued shopping. Employees returned to work. The elderly man stood alone while rain soaked through every layer of clothing he wore. Marcus remembered his mother telling him something years ago when he was a teenager. Character is not what you do when everyone is watching, she used to say. Character is what you do when nobody expects anything from you. He glanced toward the stockroom. Technically, he was supposed to return immediately and finish inventory. Karen had already made it clear she expected him to stay there all afternoon. Getting involved could easily create problems. But every time Marcus looked at the old man, those concerns felt smaller. Finally, he set down the inventory box beside a display shelf and started walking toward the entrance. As he approached, Tyler noticed him. "Where are you going?" Tyler asked. Marcus kept walking. "To help someone." Tyler smirked. "Trust me, Karen is not going to like that." Marcus did not answer. The automatic door slid open, and a gust of cold air rushed into the store. For the first time, he stood face to face with the elderly man. Up close, the man looked even older than Marcus had expected. Rainwater dripped from the brim of his hat. His hands trembled slightly from the cold. Yet there was something unusual about his eyes. They were calm, alert, almost as if he were carefully observing everything around him. The old man offered a polite smile. "Good afternoon," he said softly. "I apologize if I am causing trouble." Marcus shook his head. "You are not causing any trouble, sir." Behind him, he could already feel several employees watching. Marcus stepped slightly aside and held the door open. "Please come in out of the rain," he said. The elderly man hesitated. "I do not want to cause problems for you." Marcus smiled. "You are a customer, sir. You belong here as much as anyone else." For a brief moment, something passed across the old man's face. Gratitude, perhaps, or surprise. He nodded and slowly stepped inside. Water dripped from his coat onto the floor as the automatic doors closed behind them. The warmth of the store immediately seemed to ease some of the tension in his shoulders. Marcus noticed how tired he looked. Not just physically tired, but the kind of tired that came from carrying many years on your back. "Would you like somewhere to sit?" Marcus asked. "That would be kind." Marcus guided him toward a small seating area near the pharmacy department. Several customers glanced their way. A few whispered. One woman wrinkled her nose before turning her shopping cart into another aisle. Marcus pretended not to notice. He pulled out a chair and waited until the old man sat down comfortably. "Thank you," the man said. "Most people do not stop anymore." Marcus looked at him. Everyone needs help sometimes. Nearby, Tyler watched the scene unfold with obvious amusement. He pulled out his phone and sent a message. Less than a minute later, Karen appeared from the front office. Her expression darkened immediately. Marcus could practically see the irritation building on her face. She started walking toward them, but stopped when several customers entered her line of sight. Instead, she stood at a distance, observing. Marcus knew she was not happy. He also knew he did not care. "Can I get you some water?" he asked. "That would be wonderful." Marcus returned a minute later carrying a bottle of water from the employee refrigerator. The elderly man accepted it with both hands. "You are very kind," he said quietly. "My mother would disagree," Marcus joked. The old man chuckled. It was a genuine laugh, warm and relaxed. "Then your mother must have very high standards." For the first time all afternoon, Marcus laughed too. As the rain continued falling outside, the two men talked. Nothing dramatic, nothing extraordinary. They spoke about Chicago weather, traffic, and how quickly neighborhoods changed over time. Yet Marcus found himself enjoying the conversation. There was something unusual about the old man. He listened carefully. He never interrupted. And every question he asked seemed thoughtful. After several minutes, the man slowly stood from the chair. "I should not take more of your time," he said. "Actually, I came here because I needed a few groceries." "Then let me help you find them." Together they began moving through the aisles. Marcus grabbed a shopping basket while the elderly man leaned on his cane. Several employees continued watching from a distance. Karen watched too. Every passing minute seemed to make her more irritated. Near the produce section, the old man paused and looked around the store. His eyes moved carefully from employee to employee, customer to customer, almost as if he were studying something. Then he turned back toward Marcus and smiled. "Tell me," he asked softly, "have you always been the kind of person who helps strangers?" Marcus smiled as he adjusted the shopping basket. "I try to help when I can," he said. "My mother raised me that way." The elderly man nodded thoughtfully. "Not everyone follows those lessons once life becomes difficult." Marcus shrugged. "Life is difficult for everybody. That is usually when people need kindness the most." The old man seemed to consider that answer carefully. They continued through the store together. The items in the basket were simple: a loaf of wheat bread, a carton of milk, soup, fresh fruit, a few basic groceries that would barely fill half a kitchen cabinet. Nothing expensive, nothing unusual. Yet wherever they walked, Marcus could feel eyes following them. Employees whispered. Customers glanced over. A teenager near the frozen food section discreetly recorded a short video on his phone before his mother told him to stop. The atmosphere felt strange, as though helping an elderly customer had somehow become the day's entertainment. Near the checkout lanes, Karen finally decided she had seen enough. She approached with Tyler walking beside her. Her smile looked professional, but Marcus knew her well enough to recognize when she was angry. "Marcus," she said sharply, "what exactly are you doing?" Marcus remained calm, helping a customer shop. Karen folded her arms. "For nearly 30 minutes? He needed assistance. Your assignment is inventory." Several nearby customers slowed their carts, sensing tension. Marcus glanced toward the elderly man. "I will return to inventory as soon as we finish." Karen's eyes moved to Walter. She looked him up and down in a way that immediately made Marcus uncomfortable. "Sir," she said, forcing a smile, "perhaps one of our customer service brochures could help you find local assistance programs." The old man blinked. "Assistance programs?" Karen nodded. "Shelters, community services, food resources." A silence followed. Marcus saw confusion cross Walter's face. Then realization. Karen had already decided exactly who she thought he was. Tyler chuckled softly beside her. "We are just trying to help," he added. Walter's expression remained polite. "Thank you, but I came here to buy groceries." Karen's smile tightened. Of course. The way she said it made it clear she did not believe him. Marcus felt embarrassment on Walter's behalf. Not because of the old man, because of how people were treating him. Walter simply adjusted his cane and looked at Marcus. "Would you mind helping me finish?" he asked. "Not at all." Karen's patience visibly disappeared. "Marcus, office, now." Several customers stopped pretending not to listen. Marcus took a slow breath. "Can it wait 5 minutes?" Karen stared at him. "No, it cannot." Tyler smirked as if he already knew how this conversation would end. Walter glanced between them. "I apologize," he said quietly. "This seems to be causing trouble." Marcus shook his head immediately. "You have done nothing wrong." For the first time, Karen's expression hardened completely. "Actually," she said, "the problem is that some employees do not understand priorities." Marcus knew exactly who she meant. Around them, the store seemed unusually quiet. Even the customers could sense something unpleasant approaching. Then Karen pointed toward the front office. "Now." Marcus followed Karen toward the front office while dozens of eyes tracked his every step. He could feel the tension spreading through the store. Customers pretended to continue shopping, but many slowed down near the front registers. Employees suddenly found reasons to remain nearby. Everyone sensed that something unpleasant was about to happen. Inside the office, Karen closed the door behind them. Tyler remained standing near the entrance with his arms folded. Marcus stayed calm. "What is this about?" he asked. Karen stared at him across her desk. "You know exactly what this is about. Helping a customer? Ignoring direct instructions." Marcus took a breath. The man needed assistance. Karen laughed without humor. "That man has been wandering around the store for nearly an hour. He is buying groceries." "Is he?" Karen leaned back in her chair. "Because from where I am sitting, it looks like you abandoned your responsibilities to play social worker." Marcus felt frustration building inside him. "I helped someone who needed help. That is part of customer service." "No," Karen replied sharply. "Your job is to follow directions." For a moment, the room became silent. Marcus knew this conversation was no longer about inventory. It was about something deeper. Karen disliked employees who thought for themselves. She disliked anyone who challenged her decisions, even politely. Tyler finally spoke. "You should probably just apologize." Marcus looked at him. "For what?" Tyler shrugged. "Making things difficult." Karen nodded immediately. "Exactly." Marcus shook his head. "I am not apologizing for helping an elderly customer." Karen's expression hardened. "Then you are forcing my hand." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He had bills to pay. Rent was due in less than 2 weeks. His mother depended on him whenever unexpected expenses appeared. He needed this job. Yet even knowing all of that, he could not convince himself he had done something wrong. Karen opened a file on her tablet. Over the past 6 months, you have repeatedly ignored operational priorities. Marcus frowned. What are you talking about? Helping customers carry bags to their vehicles when you were assigned elsewhere. Spending excessive time assisting shoppers. Leaving tasks unfinished because you decided someone else needed attention. Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. The examples she listed were things customers regularly thanked him for doing. Those are not violations, he said quietly. Those are reasons people come back to this store. Karen looked completely unmoved. The decision has already been made. For the first time, Marcus understood where this was going. The realization hit him like cold water. Tyler avoided eye contact. Karen tapped the screen one final time. Marcus Johnson, effective immediately, your employment with Brooks Market is terminated. The words seemed to hang in the air. Marcus stared at her. 3 years. 3 years of arriving early, covering shifts, helping customers, and doing everything he could to be a good employee. Gone in a single sentence. You are firing me? Karen folded her hands. For repeated failure to follow management directives. Marcus looked down for a moment. Disappointment settled heavily in his chest. Not because he had lost respect for Karen. That had happened long ago. What hurt was realizing that doing the right thing had cost him the job he worked so hard to keep. Karen slid a document across the desk. Turn in your badge before you leave. Marcus picked up the paper slowly. Outside the office window, he could see customers moving. Through the store, near the checkout lane stood Walter Brooks, still holding his shopping basket. The elderly man looked toward the office. Their eyes met through the glass. And for the first time all afternoon, Marcus noticed something unexpected. Walter did not look surprised. He looked deeply disappointed. Marcus walked out of the office carrying a small cardboard box that contained little more than a name badge, a coffee mug, and a few personal items he had collected over the years. The store suddenly felt different. Just an hour earlier, he had been an employee. Now he felt like a stranger passing through a place where he no longer belonged. Several co-workers avoided eye contact as he crossed the sales floor. Others looked uncomfortable. Linda, the cashier who had spoken with him earlier, seemed shocked. She started to say something, but stopped when Karen appeared near the registers. Marcus could not blame her. Nobody wanted to become Karen's next target. Near the front entrance, Walter Brooks was still waiting with the shopping basket resting beside him. The elderly man slowly stood when Marcus approached. I heard enough to understand what happened, Walter said quietly. Marcus forced a small smile. Then you know today did not exactly go according to plan. Walter looked genuinely troubled. You lost your job because you helped me. No, Marcus replied. I lost my job because someone was looking for a reason to get rid of me. Walter studied his face. You are handling this remarkably well. Marcus glanced toward the parking lot outside. Rain still fell steadily against the windows. I am trying. For a moment, neither man spoke. Customers continued moving through the checkout lanes. Shopping carts rattled across the floor. Life inside the store continued as though nothing important had happened. Yet Marcus felt as if the entire direction of his future had shifted in a single afternoon. Walter reached for the basket. I should pay for these groceries and leave. Together they approached a checkout lane. The cashier scanned the items one by one. Bread, soup, milk, fruit. The total appeared on the screen. Walter searched through his coat pockets. Then, another pocket. Then another. His expression changed. That is unfortunate. The cashier waited. Is there a problem, sir? Walter nodded slowly. I appear to have misplaced my wallet. The cashier immediately looked uncomfortable. The customers waiting behind him exchanged glances. Marcus could almost predict what would happen next. Karen noticed the situation and started walking toward them. Tyler followed close behind. The expression on Karen's face suggested she had just been handed another opportunity. What seems to be the issue? She asked. The cashier explained. Karen sighed dramatically. Of course. Walter remained calm. I assure you, I intended to pay. Karen folded her arms. Naturally. The sarcasm was impossible to miss. Several customers began whispering. One man shook his head. Another woman looked irritated by the delay. Marcus felt embarrassment rising again, not for Walter, but for everyone else. The old man had done nothing wrong, yet people had already decided what kind of person he was. Walter looked at the groceries and then at Marcus. I suppose I will have to leave them behind. Marcus stared at the basket for a second. The items were not expensive. In fact, the entire purchase cost less than a family dinner at a casual restaurant. Without saying a word, he pulled out his debit card. Walter immediately shook his head. You have already done enough. Marcus smiled. Maybe, but nobody should go home without food because they misplaced a wallet. As he handed the card to the cashier, Karen's expression darkened in a way that made it clear the situation was about to become even worse. The cashier hesitated before taking Marcus's debit card. Everyone nearby seemed to be watching now. Customers waiting in line stopped pretending not to listen. Tyler looked amused. Karen looked furious. Walter stood quietly beside the register, his weathered hands resting on the handle of his cane. Marcus, Karen said sharply, you no longer work here. Marcus glanced at her. I know. Then perhaps you should stop creating disruptions before you leave. Marcus ignored the comment and nodded toward the cashier. Go ahead. The cashier completed the transaction. A receipt printed from the register. The total was not enough to destroy Marcus financially, but it was money he could not easily spare. Not after losing his job. Not with rent due soon. Not with his mother's medical bills arriving every month. Yet as he handed the receipt to Walter, he felt no regret. Walter accepted it slowly. His eyes remained fixed on Marcus. Thank you, he said. You do not owe me anything. Marcus smiled. Maybe not. But everybody needs help once in a while. The old man became very quiet. For several seconds, he simply stood there studying Marcus's face. It was the same thoughtful expression Marcus had noticed throughout the afternoon. The expression of someone paying attention to details other people missed. Finally, Walter nodded. You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone good, I hope. A faint smile appeared. The best man I ever knew. Karen rolled her eyes. Wonderful. Is everyone finished? Walter turned toward her. Young lady, do you always speak to people this way? Tyler immediately laughed. Karen's smile disappeared. Excuse me. Walter remained calm. I am only curious. Karen folded her arms. What you call curiosity, I call wasting time. Several customers exchanged uncomfortable looks. Even Tyler stopped smiling for a moment. Walter nodded slowly as if mentally recording the answer. I see. Then he reached into his coat pocket and removed a small business card. It looked old and slightly worn around the edges. He handed it to Marcus. Keep this. Marcus looked down at the card. There was only a name and an email address printed on it. Nothing else. No company logo. No title. No explanation. What is this? Marcus asked. A way to contact me. Marcus frowned. You really do not owe me anything. Walter smiled. Perhaps not. But I would still like you to keep it. Marcus slipped the card into his pocket. All right. Walter reached for the grocery bags. Marcus immediately offered to carry them outside. Together they walked toward the entrance while the entire store seemed to watch. As they reached the automatic doors, Walter stopped. Rain still fell across the parking lot, though it had softened to a light drizzle. The old man turned back toward Marcus one last time. Let me ask you something. Sure. Walter's eyes remained steady. If you could go back and do today over again, knowing exactly how it would end, would you still help me? The question caught Marcus off guard. He thought about the termination notice, the lost paycheck, the uncertainty waiting for him at home. Then he looked at the elderly man standing alone with his groceries. Yes, Marcus said without hesitation. I would. Walter's expression changed. Not surprise. Not relief. Something deeper. Almost pride. He nodded once. Good. Then he stepped into the rain and slowly walked toward the far end of the parking lot. Marcus watched him disappear between rows of vehicles. A moment later, Tyler approached from behind. You just lost your job for a stranger. Marcus shrugged. Maybe. Tyler smirked. That old guy cannot help you now. Marcus looked toward the parking lot one final time. For some reason, he was not completely sure Tyler was right. Marcus drove home through the evening rain with more questions than answers. The cardboard box containing his belongings sat on the passenger seat. Every time he glanced at it, the reality felt heavier. 3 years of work had ended in a single afternoon. When he arrived at his apartment, the familiar sight of the aging brick building brought little comfort. He climbed the stairs, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The small apartment was clean but modest. Framed family photos lined one wall. A stack of unpaid bills sat neatly on the kitchen counter. Marcus placed the box on the table and loosened his tie. His phone immediately buzzed with a message from his mother asking how his day had gone. He stared at the screen for several seconds before typing a simple response. Long day. I will call tomorrow. He hated worrying her. A few hours later, Marcus sat on the couch reviewing job listings online. The numbers did not look encouraging. Chicago was competitive. Rent was expensive. Finding a new position quickly would not be easy. Around 9 o'clock, he reached into his pocket and found the business card Walter had given him. He turned it over in his hand. There was still nothing unusual about it. Just a name and an email address. No title. No company. No explanation. Marcus almost laughed. Tyler had probably been right. The old man was simply a stranger who happened to need help. Yet something continued bothering him. Walter's calm confidence. The way he observed people. The strange question he asked before leaving. None of it felt ordinary. Marcus placed the card on the coffee table and tried to forget about it. The next morning, he woke early out of habit. For a few seconds, he forgot he no longer had a job. Then reality returned. He made coffee and opened his laptop. Before he could begin searching for work again, an email notification appeared. The sender's name immediately caught his attention. Walter Brooks. Marcus sat up straighter. His pulse quickened slightly as he opened the message. The email was surprisingly short. Marcus, thank you for your kindness yesterday. If you are available tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I would like to invite you to visit Brooks Holdings headquarters. Please ask for Rebecca Langley upon arrival. Business attire requested. Sincerely, Walter Brooks. Marcus read the message twice. Then a third time. Brooks Holdings. The name sounded familiar. Very familiar. He opened a search engine and typed it in. The results appeared instantly. Brooks Holdings was not a small company. It was one of the largest retail corporations in the country. Hundreds of locations. Thousands of employees. Billions in annual revenue. Marcus stared at the screen. Why would someone connected to Brooks Holdings want to meet him? More importantly, how was Walter connected to Brooks Holdings at all? The questions multiplied faster than the answers. Just then another message arrived. This time from an unfamiliar number. Mr. Johnson, transportation can be provided if necessary. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Marcus slowly lowered the phone. Somewhere inside him, uncertainty was beginning to transform into curiosity. For the first time since losing his job, he felt something unexpected. Hope. The next morning, Marcus stood in front of the mirror adjusting the only suit he owned. It was not expensive, but it was clean and professional. As he left his apartment, he still had no idea what awaited him at Brooks Holdings headquarters. During the train ride downtown, he searched the company again. The more he read, the more confused he became. Brooks Holdings owned hundreds of retail locations across multiple states. The corporation generated billions of dollars every year. Why would someone connected to an organization that large want to meet a former grocery store employee? 40 minutes later, Marcus stepped onto the sidewalk and looked up. The headquarters tower stretched high above the Chicago skyline. Glass walls reflected the morning sunlight. Employees in business attire moved through the revolving doors carrying laptops and briefcases. Everything about the building projected success. Marcus suddenly felt underdressed despite wearing his best suit. He entered the lobby and immediately froze. The space was enormous. Polished marble floors extended across the room. Large digital displays showcased company achievements and community programs. A massive corporate logo dominated the far wall. Near the reception desk stood a bronze statue of an older man. Marcus walked closer. His eyes widened. The statue looked familiar. Very familiar. The facial features. The posture. Even the expression. It resembled Walter Brooks. Before Marcus could study it further, a receptionist greeted him warmly. Good morning. How may I help you? Marcus cleared his throat. I am here to see Rebecca Langley. The receptionist smiled immediately. Mr. Johnson? Marcus blinked. Yes. We have been expecting you. That answer only deepened the mystery. Within minutes, a professional woman in her 40s approached from the executive elevators. Marcus Johnson? She asked. I am Rebecca Langley. They shook hands. Thank you for coming. Marcus followed her toward the elevators. As they rose through the building, he noticed employees greeting Rebecca with obvious respect. Some even stepped aside when she passed. Whatever her position was, it appeared to be important. Can I ask something? Marcus finally said. Rebecca smiled. You probably have many questions. More than a few. She laughed softly. That is understandable. How does Walter Brooks know this company? Rebecca glanced at him for a moment. You will have your answer very soon. That response was polite but carefully controlled. The elevator continued upward. Floor after floor passed by. Eventually, the doors opened onto an executive level unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Elegant artwork decorated the hallways. Conference rooms lined the corridor. Several senior executives stood talking quietly near a large set of double doors. Then something unusual happened. As Marcus walked past, multiple executives turned and looked directly at him. Not with curiosity, not with annoyance, with interest, almost as if they already knew who he was. Marcus felt his heart beating faster. Rebecca stopped in front of the largest conference room on the floor. The double doors stood closed. Voices could be heard inside. She turned toward him. "Before we go in, there is something you should know." Marcus waited. Rebecca smiled. Yesterday was not an ordinary day. Then she reached for the handle and slowly opened the doors. Marcus stepped into the conference room and immediately stopped walking. Around a long, polished table sat some of the most senior leaders in Brooks Holdings. Men and women whose names appeared in annual reports and business magazines were gathered in one place. Yet none of them captured his attention. At the head of the table sat Walter Brooks. Gone was the rain-soaked coat. Gone was the worn hat. Gone was the image of a tired old man standing outside a grocery store. Walter now wore a perfectly tailored navy suit. His silver hair was neatly combed. His posture was straight and confident. The room carried the quiet authority that surrounded people accustomed to making important decisions. Marcus felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath him. For a moment, he could not speak. Then something even more surprising happened. Every executive in the room stood up when Walter looked toward the door. The gesture was immediate and automatic. It was the kind of respect people gave only to someone truly powerful. Walter smiled warmly. "Good morning, Marcus." Marcus stared at him. "You are Walter Brooks." Several executives exchanged amused looks. Walter nodded. "I am." Marcus glanced around the room. "The Walter Brooks." A few people chuckled softly. Walter smiled again. "I suppose so." Marcus remembered the statue in the lobby, the company name, the way employees reacted to Rebecca. Suddenly, every strange detail from the previous 2 days began fitting together. Walter gestured toward an empty chair. "Please sit down." Marcus lowered himself into the seat, still trying to process everything. Walter folded his hands on the table. "Yesterday, I visited one of our stores." "To test people?" Marcus asked. Walter's eyes twinkled slightly. "Among other reasons." One executive leaned forward. "Mr. Brooks has spent years personally evaluating company culture." Marcus looked from one face to another. None of this felt real. Walter nodded toward a large screen mounted on the wall. "Tell me, Marcus, what do you believe matters most in customer service?" Marcus hesitated. "People." Several executives exchanged approving looks. Walter smiled. "Exactly." He pressed a button on a remote control. Security footage appeared on the screen. Marcus immediately recognized the store. The footage showed the entrance, the rain, the security guard, Walter standing outside. Then it showed Marcus opening the door and helping him inside. The room remained silent as more footage played. Every interaction, every conversation, every decision. Walter paused the video at the moment Marcus offered to pay for the groceries. "Do you know what surprised me most?" Walter asked. Marcus shook his head. "You did all of this after losing your job." Another executive nodded slowly. "Most people would have walked away." Walter looked directly at Marcus. "You gained nothing by helping me." Marcus answered honestly. "I was not trying to gain anything." A smile spread across Walter's face. "That is exactly why you are here." At that exact moment, a phone began ringing somewhere on the conference table. One executive glanced at the screen and frowned. Then another phone rang. And another. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Walter looked toward Rebecca. "What is happening?" Rebecca checked a message and raised an eyebrow. "Sir," she said carefully, "it appears Karen Whitmore has just learned who visited her store yesterday." The room became noticeably quieter after Rebecca spoke. Walter Brooks did not look angry. In fact, his expression remained remarkably calm. Somehow that seemed far more unsettling. One executive checked a message on her tablet and shook her head slowly. "The information is spreading through the company faster than expected," she said. Another executive looked toward Walter. "Several district managers are already asking questions." Walter nodded. As they should. Marcus sat silently, still absorbing everything around him. Less than 24 hours earlier, he had been carrying boxes in a grocery store stockroom. Now he was sitting beside the founder of one of the largest retail corporations in America, while senior executives discussed events he had witnessed firsthand. Rebecca tapped a few keys on her tablet. "We have completed a preliminary review of the store footage." Walter folded his hands. "And?" Rebecca looked directly at him. "The footage confirms every concern you have raised over the past year regarding leadership culture at that location." Several executives exchanged serious looks. Another screen illuminated at the front of the room. Clips from the previous day began appearing one after another. Karen dismissing customers. Karen speaking disrespectfully to employees. Tyler encouraging the behavior. Staff members remaining silent because they feared retaliation. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Walter watched quietly. The deeper the review went, the more uncomfortable some executives appeared. Marcus noticed something important. This was clearly not about one bad day. It was about a culture that had been allowed to grow unchecked for a long time. Finally, the footage reached the moment Karen terminated Marcus's employment. The room fell silent again. Walter paused the video. "A company can survive mistakes," he said calmly. "What it cannot survive is forgetting why it exists." No one interrupted. "Our stores do not exist because of buildings. They do not exist because of quarterly reports. They exist because people trust us." He looked around the table. "The moment we start treating people as inconveniences rather than human beings, we begin losing that trust." Several executives nodded. Rebecca received another message and glanced down. "Karen Whitmore is requesting an emergency meeting." A faint smile appeared on Walter's face. "I imagine she is. She claims she did not know your identity." Walter leaned back slightly. "That is exactly the problem." The room remained quiet. Walter continued. "If someone only treats people with respect after learning they are powerful, then respect was never the motivation." Marcus felt those words settle heavily in the room. Nobody disagreed. Because nobody could. Rebecca opened another document. "Effective immediately, Karen Whitmore's employment has been terminated. Tyler Reed has also been removed pending further review. Additional management evaluations will begin this week." Several executives approved the recommendation without hesitation. The decision was unanimous. Months of complaints, ignored warnings, and poor leadership had finally reached their conclusion. Marcus thought back to Karen's confidence inside the store. The certainty that she could treat people however she wanted without consequences. That confidence had disappeared in less than a day. Walter turned toward Marcus. "You know what interests me most?" Marcus shook his head. Walter smiled. "You never once asked who I was." Marcus laughed softly. "Honestly, I assumed you were just a man who needed help." Walter nodded. "Exactly." Then he looked around the table. "And that is why we are having this conversation today." Walter leaned forward slightly and looked directly at Marcus. "There is one final matter we need to discuss." Marcus listened carefully. Walter opened a folder that had been resting on the table. Inside were several documents. "Yesterday, you demonstrated something that cannot be taught in a training seminar and cannot be measured by a quarterly report," Walter said. "You demonstrated character." The executives around the table nodded in agreement. Marcus felt uncomfortable being the center of attention. "I just helped someone who needed help." Walter smiled. "That is exactly the point. You keep saying that as though it is ordinary. It is not." Rebecca slid one of the documents across the table. Marcus looked down and blinked. It was an employment offer. Not for a store position. Not for an entry-level role. The title alone made his heart race. Community Engagement and Customer Experience Associate. The position would work directly with corporate leadership on improving customer service culture throughout the company. Marcus looked up in disbelief. "You are offering me a corporate job?" Walter nodded. "A job that comes with full benefits, professional development opportunities, and a salary significantly higher than what you earned at the store." Marcus was speechless. Walter continued. "In addition, Brooks Holdings will fully fund your enrollment in our executive leadership education program." The room remained quiet as Marcus processed everything. Less than 2 days earlier, he had been worried about paying rent. Now opportunities he never imagined possible were being placed in front of him. "Why me?" he finally asked. Walter smiled warmly. "Because skills can be taught. Integrity cannot." One executive added. "We have interviewed candidates with impressive resumes for years. Very few demonstrate the qualities we witnessed on that security footage." Marcus glanced down at the offer again. The numbers almost did not seem real. Walter then reached into another folder. "There is one more thing." He handed Marcus a separate document. It outlined a financial assistance program for family medical expenses. Marcus read it twice before looking up. My mother's treatment? Walter nodded. Consider it support from a company that values people. Marcus felt emotion rising in his chest. For the first time since entering the building, he struggled to find words. Walter stood and extended his hand. What do you say, Marcus? Marcus rose from his chair and shook it firmly. I say thank you. The executives applauded. Not loudly, not formally, just genuine appreciation for a moment that felt bigger than a job offer. Several weeks later, Marcus walked through a different Brooks Market location while participating in his new role. As he passed the entrance, he noticed an elderly customer struggling with several grocery bags. Without hesitation, Marcus stepped forward. Can I help you with those? The customer smiled gratefully. Thank you. Marcus picked up the bags and carried them outside. As they reached the parking lot, he noticed his reflection in the store window. He smiled. The position had changed. His circumstances had changed. His future had changed. But the reason everything happened remained the same. Because on a rainy afternoon, when everyone else saw a problem, he chose to see a person. And sometimes the greatest opportunities in life begin with a simple act of kindness that nobody thinks is important until the world decides to prove otherwise.